All right. So thanks for joining us today, everyone. I'm going to go ahead. Like I said, I hit the record button. We'll post the recording to our YouTube page for anyone who wants to revisit this session or for anyone who isn't able to attend today. I'm Amy Loudermilk, the program manager for Arts Build. So, to learn more about the shared services that we offer, our community arts partners, take a look at the shared services portion of our website. I've posted that web page in the chat, so you can just click on that. Artsfield currently facilitates these services for our community arts partners, the recipients of our mission support grants. Today, we welcome our friends Lynn Talbot and Lauren Cooley, our consultants with HR Biz Solutions, who provide human resources, bookkeeping, and training to members with whom we share services. Our goal today is for you to leave with a better understanding of performance reviews and best practices and how to carry them out for the benefit of your organization. Before we get started, though, I wanted to remind everybody that we will meet again on Thursday, this Thursday, December 10th at 10:30 in the morning, to discuss what we learned from social media in 2020 and how to develop a social media strategy for 2021. For the first time in that session, we will welcome Colleen Miller, our social media consultant, as our presenter for that shared services session. So, today's presentation is set up as a webinar. If there's any questions, please include them in the chat. And with that, I turn the microphone over to Miss Lynn and Miss Lauren. Thanks, ladies.
I'll get started. And I'm not sure if it's just something with my computer, but is there like a big, what I see, is there like a big square? Is maybe just my computer? Okay, because there we go. Maybe that just got
Yeah.
a little odd. I wanted to make sure that, because sometimes, people's computers are different. And I don't see any of the participants. Can we show them? Oh, and you're not on. You're
Down at the bottom of the screen, you should see participants, Q&A, polls, chat, since you're a co-host.
Yeah, but usually on the right-hand side, I can see, I guess, so I just want to make sure they're all in the panel. I mean, that they're all here. Anne, Ellen, Miriam, Monica, Nicole, because we want to ask them to, give us some, introduce themselves. So I want to make sure they were all in the.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can allow them to talk. So
Yeah, there, now I see them. So before I didn't see them, and I was like, I just want to make sure they're in.
okay. There we
Thank
go.
you, Amy.
I just had to click allow to talk. So,
Yeah, that is great. And we will allow you to talk. So, um, hey, everybody, my name is Lynn Talbot. I know a lot of you, and thank you for coming today. We're going to talk about something that I'm sure is difficult task on how to do performance reviews and just some hints and helpful information about how you might be able to help your employees tie their performance review and their job descriptions to the mission of your nonprofit. Because really, everything you do should be driven toward that mission. And even as something as simple as doing an employee performance review on an employee, that should still, have the same impact for your mission. But what I wanted to do was go around and have you each just introduce yourself and tell us what you do right now for performance reviews. And if you don't do them, that's fine. That's why you're here today. But tell us what you do, and then anything else that's helpful for us today. And Anne, can we start with you? Anne Rushing, if you're able to talk. Thanks.
Sure. Will you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, no worries. Just introduce yourself, who you're with, and then what you are doing currently with the performance reviews in your organization.
Right. Well, I'm Anne Rushing. I'm with Sculpture Fields at Montague Park, and so right now we really only have kind of 2 half employees, and so they've also been contract until recently. So I'm just kind of trying to figure out what I do need to do to track to track how they're doing and metrics for improvement or where they're falling short or things like that.
Yeah, and with two halftime people, you think, well, that shouldn't be too difficult, right? But it's always some reason it feels like a monumental task, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I know. Ellen, how about you?
We also have two part-time employees. We meet weekly and don't do any kind of formal reviews other than just talk about what's been going on and how things can be improved or how things are going or what the strengths are. And so it's kind of informal. There's nothing other than that going on with performance reviews.
Okay, and in the past, maybe you haven't had you have some pretty good, employees that you haven't had to do like a employee improvement plan, or let's sit down and talk about why you're not meeting your goals. And it's always good if you have employees that you don't have to do that with, and so that makes it easier to do performance reviews if everybody's getting, a gold star.
Right.
But it is nice to still be able to put it on paper. And I found the same thing with some of my employees that, like, gosh, they're just getting a 5 stars on everything. But being able to dig a little deeper and saying, well, what do you need, employee? What do you want to do? How do you want to grow? And how can I, as the director, help you grow in your position, and maybe even personally if they're wanting to move on to something else. So that's great. All right, next, Miriam.
Hi, my name is Miriam Amanda, and I'm with Arts Build, and I am not like doing performance reviews. I just am curious, sitting in. Thanks.
And that's fantastic. Just to learn. I appreciate that. And Monica, I know you can tell us a little bit introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hey, it's Monica Kinsey. I am a consultant, and I work closely with the Arts Build team and with 18 other nonprofits that are part of a collective. I actually know everyone so far who has said hello. And I'm here to see how these shared services are going and how they're attended, and also what information I can pull from them to share with these nonprofits.
Yes, fantastic. I'm so glad you're here, Monica, and feel free to, pipe in with any information that you may have that will help everybody. Nicole?
Hi, I'm Nicole. I do a lot of work with Chattanooga Girls Rock. I volunteer as marketing chair, and we have now formed digital content committee. So we have 5 members now, and so we don't use performance reviews. It's not something that we're just accustomed to. So I am really curious as to how I can bring this information back to our newly created team and how that might help us with our goals for digital content in the future.
That's great. Now, do you have any employees at Girls Rock?
We don't. We're a nonprofit that's volunteer based. So
Okay.
all of our volunteers, we are all volunteers.
Right. That's what I thought, because I think Christine, didn't she used to run that ran the Pet Placement Center? Didn't she help with that?
Yes. Yeah. No.
Oh, wonderful. Well, hopefully you'll get some tidbits today. And our last person here is Mark.
Yes,
Whose
Mark
phone-
Anderson.
Whose phone's ringing?
Well, I can get that later. Yeah, Mark Anderson. I'm with the Chattanooga Writers Guild,
Yes.
and we don't have employees. We have volunteers. And of course, any volunteer board organization always needs good management. And I'm the president and just trying to help us get through a difficult season.
Yeah, well, great. Well, welcome. It sounds like did I get everybody? I think I've got everybody. So yeah, we have quite a variety, and as with a lot of nonprofits, you're small, and maybe some of you don't have any employees or just a few, but there's always opportunities to help improve performance. And, even with volunteers, Laura and I don't go a lot into any detail here about, well, how do you help kind of motivate and, I don't know, get your volunteers on that path that you need them to be. Because when somebody volunteers, it's very sensitive. You're super appreciative, and you just want to make sure that their goals align with your goals. So it might be interesting today. We could have a little conversation about that as well. So some of the things you learned here today may be able to be applied to some volunteers as well. While you wouldn't do a formal performance review, you might be able to, do some coaching or something like that, So yeah, today I just want to remind everybody that HR Business Solutions, we are not lawyers. And so, everything we say here is just provided for informational purposes, and we call it best practices. So we do provide human resources support to small businesses and nonprofits. And so based on our years and years of experience, and Lauren and I together have over 20 something years of HR experience, these are sort of our best practices, and we want to make sure our content is accurate, but it's just no guarantee that it's not perfect, And if you haven't done so already, we usually encourage people to try to establish a relationship with legal counsel, and we do have legal counsel that we keep on retainer as well. So if you come to us with an issue and it's a little bit more than just, I think you might be too late for us, or we need some assistance, we have legal counsel, an employment lawyer in town that we talk with and help with that. So yeah, that's really it for today. I'm going to let Lauren introduce herself and talk about the what you're going to go over today. So today's lesson, and we want people to participate and pipe in and say, what do you mean by that? Or I don't know what this KPI is. You guys are using lingo, We'll try to go into all the details of this as well, but please feel free to, to jump in and ask questions. And I'm going to try to monitor the chat as well. I'm going to open it up right now so I can monitor the chat. And I'll let Lauren go ahead and start with today. And I may be popping in and out, but I'll let Lauren start today. And just feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and we'll help you out. How's that sound? All right, Lauren.
Great. Thank you, Lynn. So my name is Lauren Cooley. Like Lynn said, I have a plethora of HR knowledge that I think this is a great platform to share and kind of help all the nonprofits get to the next level. And I know it doesn't sound like many people are administering performance reviews, but I think it's good to learn, and maybe you can take a piece of this back to gear it to what your organization needs. Everybody kind of dreads performance reviews, but in the end, the studies have shown that it does make employees feel valued, to kind of realize that somebody's watching them. And, everybody thinks about it like you get a pay increase. So that's always a perk too. But so this is kind of what we're going to go through during this PowerPoint presentation. So I won't spoil anything, but we're going to get down to the basics of what is a performance review, why they're important, how do I rate performance, and how do you put a metric to that, and then steps you can take to deliver an effective performance review. Then talk about things that a performance review should not be used for, and then how coaching and feedback is important to the performance review process. Let's get into it. Okay, so first we have what is a performance review. So the formal definition is it is an evaluation that identifies strengths and weaknesses and offers feedback and sets goals for future performance. So the main takeaway is kind of setting it up for future goals during a performance review. So you're not only focusing on the past. It can be used as the organization's benchmark for your total compensation program. That means if you have this one time of year that you have to review every team member's pay rate, that can really help you avoid any kind of preferential treatment with pay, kind of make sure everybody's on the same playing field with their pay rates, and make sure performance is value in how you're paying your team members. It's a consistent tool for coaching, of course, and then you can also plan how your team is doing if you know how they're all performing. So think strategically with that to set up for the future. So an example of that would be if you know you have a huge project coming down the line that requires a lot of multitasking, and you can remember based on your performance review and how you've really evaluated, say, Mary's skill set, and multitasking is not her strong suit, then you can think, okay, well, I'm going to need a little bit more time for this one because I know that's not something that's Mary's strong suit. So we can see how that can help you plan for the future. It provides a record for performance for managers to consider when thinking about promoting and transferring. And this can go with also how it can protect you from legal challenges in the future. One thing that lawsuits or any sort of claims that come up will ask about is the performance review and see what you have documented. So if you promote one team member and not another, but then you review, say the team member that didn't get promoted filed a claim with the EEOC, one aspect that they can look at is what information was in the performance review. So if the team member that didn't get promoted had a really stellar performance review with all 5 stars and everything, and the team member that got the promotion had one that wasn't up to par, that could come back to say, well, how come they didn't get this in their performance review, but then they ended up getting promoted? It's just something that it needs to line up with how you're documenting all of your team members to set you up for success in case any kind of claim came on down the line. And that also goes with justifying pay increases for your team members and how you could put a metric level on the success for justifying the pay rate. Let's see, and how I think I mentioned how you can show how it can really show how much the organization cares about a team member, and just kind of not focusing in on the bad, I think, is a big perception with a performance review, that it's only going to focus in on the poor performance and negative things. But it's also a really good time to celebrate wins and focus on the good that a team member is doing. So then you can really justify a pay increase for them. So can performance be measured? Absolutely. We're going to get more into that on the next slide and talk about how it can be measured. But I think that's one difficult thing to wrap your mind around too, is how you can kind of put a number on performance. So how do I start the performance review process? This is where job descriptions come into play. This should happen long before a performance review is written and presented to an employee. But if the employee has a clear understanding on what his or her job is, then you can get the measurable factors and achieve goals. So you really want to be clear and consistent with what the team member is doing and how their job duties are, like they know every single day what's expected of them, because then it makes it a lot easier to be able to rate and kind of understand that they know what they should be doing. Are they actually doing it? So what is a KPI? This is an important HR lingo going back to performance reviews. So a KPI stands for a key performance indicator. A key performance indicator is a quantifiable measurement that should be agreed to beforehand based on what was in the job description, and it will reflect on the critical success factors of an organization. So what does that mean? I found some good examples of it. So a school may focus and have its key performance indicator be graduation rates of students. Like that could be a teacher's KPI. A social service organization might be the number of clients assisted during the year and how many, if you had a rating system, like how satisfied a customer was after being helped by an organization, that could be a number that you could put with somebody in a service organization position. Let's see. So those are the KPIs. So how you'll measure based on what's in the job description. So then you would want to set your performance review time period. Typically, this is a calendar year for most companies. That's why we said December is kind of the time when you would be wrapping these up if you were looking at a calendar year. And you also want to select a form that meets the organization goals. And you want to make sure firsthand that it's something your managers would also understand and use when you're choosing a form. And this kind of goes into the overall system. There's a lot of different forms and systems that you can use. I didn't want to go into all of those today, but typically organizations use a ranking system. So you would take your KPIs and then have a total score at the end of it based on what you can measure. Some would run from like 1 to 3, some would run to 1 to 5. So 1 would be totally not performing. A 5 would be really exceeding expectations. So, and then you could fall somewhere in between there. And typically you would take that number, kind of get an average at the end, and then you could put it on in your system and it will rank a total number for your whole organization. So you might have heard where sometimes team members could fall into a mid-range of about 70%. Then you would have like your top 20% and bottom 10%. So you would know that in your bottom 10%, those would need to be managed up and out, ideally. And then in your top 20, those would be the set that you could really look at, need to be promoted because they are really killing it in their job right now. And then you could look at your middle 70% as this is everybody that's performing adequately. So that's the most common that's used, and there's all kinds of different forms. If anybody had any questions or wanted to see any examples, you can ask me or Lynn and we can show you. There's also one that I thought was really cool called a 360-degree feedback. So in this system, it would collect information from a supervisor, a colleague, a subordinate, and perhaps a customer or peer. And all 4 of those would give a ranking for one employee. So then you could really get a full circle, whole picture look at how the performance is impacting each level. So it wouldn't be just a supervisor that would rate the employee. They would really get every single aspect all the way around. And then there's also somewhere you can have employees do a self-assessment or things of that nature. So those are kind of different forms also that don't use as many metrics, but it's more just behavior based. So like I said, we could do a whole PowerPoint on the different types of forms and systems. So I just kind of wanted to focus on the basics of it. But if you have any questions about those, then just let us know. So these are the steps on administering a good performance review process for the whole organization. And these are also tips and pointers that you can take back to just everyday functioning in your business. Of course, first you want to schedule a sufficient time and meeting in a quiet room. You never want to do a performance review in front of an audience or have anybody else have to listen in on it. Because team members can take it very personal. And if you have to discuss anything sensitive, you should definitely rehearse the conversation beforehand if you're going to kind of have to take it in a negative turn to discuss poor performance. It's always good just to walk through in your mind what you're going to have to say. And then if you have a team member that can be combative with you, go ahead and have some responses prepared for that conversation. You definitely want to provide with the performance review documentation and how you kind of put the numbers. And typically on the form, there's a comment section where you can kind of describe how you got the number that you got. Maintain eye contact and a positive attitude, of course. It always helps to start with the strengths and then get into the development areas where the parts that need improvement. So you want to kind of focus in, and they say boost them up, of course, at the beginning, but hopefully it wouldn't be a terrible process all the way through. But definitely it starts off on a good note, just to go ahead and start out with the strengths.
And
Avoid judge. Okay.
I was gonna say something that reminds me of that a coach had, HR coach had worked with me about with helping someone else is to do that. We call it a compliment sandwich. Have you ever heard of that phrase? Where you're like, you're really good at this. Here's what needs improvement, and then your compliments underneath as well. You compliment
Like
and you
that.
get instruction. We call it a compliment sandwich, and maybe other people have heard of that, but it does help the person hear it better instead of just saying it and then letting it go and then moving to, number 4 on the page. It's like compliment, I don't want to say critique or improvement
Right.
needed, and then compliment. So that might be something you could try when you're writing out your performance review for somebody. If you're having a little, you think this is going to be hard for this person to hear, because people, it's hard enough for you to say it. It's really hard for people to hear it, especially if you think, oh, I bet they don't realize that they're doing this, that this behavior is, people are recognizing this behavior. And so by putting the compliment sandwich on there, that might help. And you can actually write it out, and it helps. I always write mine out so that it helps me stay on track. So maybe that'll help.
Yeah, definitely. That's good. I love the compliment sandwich. Let's see. Avoid judgmental comments and personal remarks. Of course, you never want anything to come off that could be misconstrued, especially if you're having a difficult conversation that can be easily taken in the wrong way. So you definitely want to avoid any judgmental comment, and then use clear and simple words. Don't you don't have to use all the HR jargon and stuff like that. If you aren't big in an organization or anything, then you definitely just want to keep it straight and simple. You need to be confident in what you're saying to your employees. So if you don't feel comfortable using the word, then just leave it out. Provide examples and support feedback. This is good to also have written down in your comments, because anything that you need to have backed up. So for example, if you give an employee a 1 for needing improvement, you definitely would want to have examples on why you came to that conclusion and why you kind of gave them that low score. Nobody wants to just hear you get a 1 and not fully understand why or anything like that, especially if it has an impact on their pay rate or anything like that. So any kind of feedback or suggestion, that's another thing. You also want, whenever you do give the 1 or anything like that, if you had to, you want to have a way to improve and a path to take. That's ending on a positive note to kind of give that hope that they can move forward, the goal is achievable, and they know what to do whenever they leave the conversation with you. I kind of skipped a bunch around, but it's always important to give the employee the floor and kind of list off any comments or concerns that they have. It should be a two-way street with dialogue in a performance review. So it shouldn't just be the manager coming out with everything that they've observed for the year. It needs to be kind of a collective conversation. So then whenever, especially discussing the goals and future expectations, if an employee has any type of concern, like say with COVID now that, well, I can only work this many hours from home. I don't think I'm going to be able to achieve that goal in 2 months. I have my kids at home with me and everything like that. That should be something a manager should take into consideration and perhaps extend the goal out further. So it needs to be a two-way street, just with collective thinking on how to make the goal achievable. Because in the end of the performance review process, you really want the employee to achieve their goals, because it better helps the organization. And the HR tidbit, you always want to have the manager and employee sign off on the form. That way it's acknowledged that the manager delivered it, the employee signed off and understands what needs to happen for any future goals or expectations. And then you should place that document in the personnel file, typically, or at least somewhere where, you know, you can always get back to it, because it should be an ongoing document that you want to keep up with throughout the year to make sure the goals are met. Let's see. Does anybody have any questions, or is there anything in the chat? Anything like that? Good. I feel like I'm going real fast.
Yeah. Oh, that's fine. I think just,
Yeah.
you know, there's not a whole lot more to add to it, but yeah, Carla was just saying, you know, just meeting people where they are, you know, and that's a really good point to remember too. And then, you know, when Lauren was talking about like making sure the employee has time, that you listen to the employee, that is real important. And a lot of times, at least I've found, you know, sometimes employees are super nervous about employee review. It's like going to the principal's office.
Yeah.
And so they just shut down. And it's real important that you start out making sure that they have participation in each of the goals. And one of the ways to do that, and Lauren sort of touched on it, was like, if there's a specific situation, and like right now with COVID, or there's a specific thing that you're thinking, I know this is going to be an issue, it's perfectly fine to send the employee an email and say, look, your performance review is coming up next week. Why don't you sit down and why don't you write out, you know, how you feel you're doing in this area, or what are your goals for this area, you know, so that they can be prepared, and just say, be prepared to talk to me. So it's perfectly fine in advance to ask those questions so that they'll feel prepared, because I know a lot of people do kind of shut down in a performance review because they think that that's what it's for. They're just supposed to sit there and, you know, get not really browbeat, but just sit there and take it and not participate. Mm-hmm. And that is kind of the misnomer we want to, you know, dispel here. We want to be like, no, this is, you know, both sides. What do you think about that, Lauren?
Oh, definitely agree on all of it.
Yeah. And just don't be shy about when you're starting to do the performance review and you come up to that area that you're like, okay, if I'm being super honest, this person's not really meeting that area. Wow, they're great everywhere else, but this area we have some struggles, and you can see where in the future that might cause some problems or conflicts, or, you know, whatever it is. You know, it's okay to go ahead and ask them their opinion ahead of time so that they can be prepared to talk to it. You can ask them to even, you know, send in, they want to send you something, you know, a little note or a letter that says, hey, here's what I think. And it really gives you some perspective. Are they aware that they're acting like this? And if they have awareness, it's much easier to do the performance review. If they don't have awareness, it's a little bit of a different approach, right?
Definitely. It makes the conversation easier too, whenever they're not blindsided, because then they're a lot, kind of like a cat in the corner, you know, that gets pushed up against the wall or something like that. They'll come into the conversation already defensive and everything. So I think any type of preparation or communication is definitely crucial whenever you have to discuss these hard topics. And in the end, I think it's everybody, of course, we're all really great at our jobs, obviously, but you know, there's always things that people can do to improve. And so it's just kind of helping them get to the next level, even if it's hard to hear. Everybody needs a critique now and then, but in the end, nobody's perfect in every aspect of their job that they do, you know. Let's see. So what not to do with a performance review? I think we've kind of touched on a few of these, but it should never be the first time that you bring up a performance concern. So that just means if you have these things that you've reviewed all year long that your employee's doing wrong, you wouldn't want to save it for the performance review to bring it up, because it could really kind of have that cat-like effect that I just used, where they're going to be super defensive. And it doesn't reflect good of the manager. I think if you just watched the employee kind of do something wrong or that you didn't approve of all year, and then you bring it up this one time at the beginning of the year, it should not be used as a write-up for an isolated incident. So any type of isolated incident you would want to put in a formal document, like a write-up, just to put that information on a formal write-up, and then use it as progressive discipline. So that would not be what the performance review is used for. I reviewed one time that talked about a manager that slept in the office under like job performance and the performance review. And I was like, why would you put this in the performance review? That should have been a write-up, and they just didn't understand why the two documents would be separate. Let's see, but that should definitely be a write-up. The lack of differentiation. So this means that if you had multiple employees and you thought they were all amazing, you give everybody 5 stars. But then whenever somebody started slacking off and needed to maybe separate ways, there was no differentiation between anybody because they had all gotten 5 stars a month ago. So it's just, like I said, nobody's ever perfect fully in their job. So there should always be something that you can rate based on the KPIs, because ideally, or not ideally, but most of the time nobody's performing all at the exact same level. So it can skew your numbers and then kind of leave everybody on the same pay rate and everything if you don't put any differentiation between them.
Yeah, and one of the things I'll say about that, if you just sort of have that halo effect where you're like, okay, well, yes,
Right.
we're good at everything. There doesn't leave any room for growth. And if the person's scoring like perfect in everything, well, they've outgrown their job. There's nothing for them
Right.
there. They need to move to the next level, or they may leave your organization and say, I'm ready to be a director, because I'm perfect in everything. And that's certainly not what you sort of meant to convey, And so sometimes anybody that's performing great, you give them more tasks and maybe more responsibility, and then they have opportunities to grow there. So just giving people all these great stars, and maybe they are good at it all. Maybe you're not challenging them enough. Maybe they need more challenging, and then maybe they need to, if you have a scale from 1 to 5, and 5 exceeds everything at every single day, exceeds, just overwhelmingly. 3 is a great, awesome employee. Some people think 3 might be like a C on a grading scale, but it's not. 3 is like, you're awesome, you're great, you're doing everything, meet my expectations, and so 3 needs to be seen as that's sort of like, I don't know, the baseline for what your minimum effort, should be. And so you really shouldn't be giving a whole lot of 5s, maybe 5s in certain areas, 5s in leadership, 5s in, certain areas, but not overwhelmingly all 5s. That does nobody any good at all. And the person might leave because they feel like they have nowhere to grow, or they might have an inflated idea of themselves or their abilities.
Exactly. Like you said, if they think that they're ready to become a director, or we had one situation where a girl said she should become the VP of finance when she didn't have an accounting degree or anything. And it was like, well, they had boosted her up so much, that you leave there thinking that, this is the next level for you. But then, of course, we see the downside of it is after you dig into it, it came down to the manager just didn't want to fully manage and just wanted to give that halo effect, because there would be a lot of buts at the end of the sentences that talked about the girl's performance and everything like that. So That's why it's good just to be honest and forthcoming with any performance concern. Only use recent examples and not look at the whole performance period. This could just leave a lot of room for arguments during the performance review, because if you only hone in at the end of the year and not really look at the full period. So if you were only looking at somebody slacking off at the end of the year, then at the beginning of the year, they really could have been exceeding your expectations. And to them, they'll bring all of these examples of good things that they did. But if whenever you were writing it, you were only focused on the end of the year, it'll just leave a lot of room for argument. And you want to they'll really feel, I think, valued if you do bring something that they did at the beginning of the year, like, wow, they noticed that, you know. Never show personal bias or favoritism. This is, of course, in anything really, not just the performance review process. And if you're not fully prepared to deliver, then I think you should just ask for more time and deliver it at a better date whenever you are equipped, because you never want to leave the employee questioning more after the performance review, or leave feeling discouraged. Like we said, it should be something where they're boosted up with that compliment sandwich. They have the goals set forth and they know what to do. And you never want to have any incorrect information or a wrong number or metric in your performance review. Like if you had multiple employees and you used what Sally was doing and not what Mary was doing, but you had it in Mary's document, then that will come off like you weren't prepared, and it can leave the employee feeling discouraged. So those are what not to do with a performance review. Let's go to the next slide. Coaching and feedback. I think we've kind of touched on a lot of this about how it's really important. So when can you provide coaching and feedback? That would be anytime. This can be even with your part-time employees, volunteers, or anybody. It's really crucial to the success just to kind of have that expectation be known, and you can provide that to an employee anytime. You can deliver it informally on the job or in a formal one-on-one meeting. Just any kind of, I always think it's important in the moment whenever you notice something that needs to be improved or something somebody can do differently. It always helps to point it out immediately, so it's not having to remind anybody on what they did. I discussed one or two aspects. So you never want to do a full review like all over again. It should just be one or two things kind of quick to touch on to be considered coaching and feedback, and not the full performance review all over again. Focus on behaviors, not personality. This kind of goes back, you never want to get personal with anything. So I know it's hard not to be have the bleeding heart and everything, but for the job performance, you just want to hone in on what behavior they're doing, and not anything that can be a personality trait or something personal that they're going through. You know, like sort of if you know somebody's going through a really rough time, and it could be linked to their performance, that's something that you can discuss, but I wouldn't consider it coaching and feedback to what you're trying to achieve to get them to the next level for their performance. Involve the employee in problem solving and identify the problem. Like Lynn said, that can be kind of emailing and getting their perspective before sitting down or after even the performance review, just so you're kind of keeping that dialogue and realizing that the problem is here and what you need to do to achieve it. Brainstorming and writing down possible solutions, discuss each idea and offer your help. Anytime you kind of give your employees something to do, I think kind of helping them and kind of talking through your ideas that you have, maybe what you did in the past if you were in their role, anything kind of just to get that brainstorm flowing. Of course, two minds are greater than one. So I think that that's always beneficial to have that conversation. And it can really open up your eyes to where your employee's train of thought is going, and kind of see what their thought process is for problem solving. Agree on a follow-up date and specific actions to take place. So ideally in the performance review, you have these goals that needed to be achieved, and then typically you'll see quarterly is kind of a good standard to go by, because then every 3 or 4 months you can say, we're going to check in and see how you were doing with this. It's important that you actually take the time to check back in and follow up. And then kind of agree on where the employee is and what actions need to be taken if they haven't met the goal, or review and, celebrate that they achieved the goal. Or if that leads to a different goal, then what actions need to be taken to get to that point. Lynn, do you have anything else to add? I feel like coaching and feedback we could talk a lot about in different aspects, but just for the performance review, I think this kind of covers what they need to achieve.
I think that I don't know how many more slides, but I think we can open it up to questions and people can talk about that, because that is a big part of it, the coaching and feedback, and how that there we go. So yeah, we could just certainly open it up for questions, because this is a lot of information, and I know some of you, it's more than you can probably take in if you're not used to doing performance appraisals. And the important thing is that you probably don't have a performance appraisal in front of you. You've got to develop one, and that's one of the hard things too. You can go online and find different forms and maybe tailor it, to yours. But I mean, I think the thing is just keep it simple, especially if you're just starting out for the first time. But yeah, if you want to unmic and ask us a question, or unmute and ask us a question, that'll be awesome. We're happy to take questions. Don't be shy. I mean, does anybody want to tell us about maybe a performance review that they have? They have a formal one that they use right now. Does anyone have that they can talk about? Oh, right. We got lots of work to do then.
Lynn, I was going to share with my previous employer. We had annual performance reviews and it was very intensive. Like we're talking like 5 to 7 pages that you had to fill out in advance. And it was, you filled it out about your supervisor filled it out about you, and then you met about that. So I liked the idea of having a guide for the conversation, but I felt like a lot of the same question was asked several different times. So I didn't know if you all had any type of experience with that type of a performance review process.
Well, it sounds like you're with a bigger corporation that maybe had like a lot more formal policies, like a big Unum or a Coca-Cola or somebody would certainly have some really big, probably top-down, mandated stuff. And that's why I like about this group is that, being small and, especially being, nonprofit, we're here to help serve our mission and serve our employees, and just trying to start from kind of the bottom up, the employee up, creating that document, just a much simpler one. But I've been in a big organization too. I used to work at Eddie Bauer, and they had a big top down one as well. And it was intimidating, 4 or 5 pages, and you just sit there, feel like you have to, take it. And that should not be what a performance review is about at all. If you work for one of those big companies, all right, you can't help it. But for us, yeah, we'll have to work hard to keep that out of our culture, right?
Right. I think it can go back whenever, I'm just assuming whenever you get a kind of stale form like that, the managers aren't really going to be that effective completing it. Like if I'm writing it, I'm like, this is asking me the same question over and over again, So I think it's important how you select the form and make sure it goes for everything in your organization. Like I've seen ones that I felt were effective for me, but then my friend in the accounting department, they didn't have much differentiation in their jobs to really do the full-on review for it, I felt like. And so they would kind of go stale with the same stuff, getting repetitive. But then we actually kind of changed our performance review process at the last organization I was with, and really geared it more towards the values and the mission of the company that had changed. So you had a value of people first, and you had to give a rating on how you met that value. And each value they kind of rated based on that. So that can be taken for the full job for every position, and not just kind of looking at the KPIs or, something specific to the job. And I thought that was kind of cool because everybody, needed to focus in on people first. So it kind of gave a rating and discussed how you did with that throughout the year.
Yeah. What other questions do you guys have for us?
Well, I have one that I think might apply to several of us here, because kind of the nature of nonprofits, especially some of us that are newer, is that volunteers maybe move into job roles, or if, like, I'm still, even though I've been here for 2 years, I'm still kind of new, and my part-time employee has been working here longer than I has, and has more knowledge of certain things that need to be done. So I'm curious how, especially when you're, when things are a lot more fluid, there's not, everything's been like, well, we need all hands on deck to pitch in on this, and things are, not like in a traditional office space where it's like, this is my manager, this is the accountant working on this is the sub accountant working on this, how you can put some of these things into practice.
I think it's important to keep, even if it's still not like department based or anything, but kind of keep who's in charge. And I don't really want to say a hierarchy system, but people should have a manager or somebody that they know who to go with for any kind of concern in the workplace. So as long as you have that role, that's kind of the superior one, I think that's all you really need for the process. What do you think, Lynn? Oh, you're still muted.
Yeah, sorry. I agree with that. I think every company is different, and so that's one of the things we really, really stress. Your handbook isn't the same, your mission isn't the same, your employees aren't the same, your managers aren't the same. So really, your document has to be, unique for that manner, and you have to be able to present it in a manner that's not, I don't say threatening, but not intimidating, to the employee. I was going to show you an example. I'm going to share my screen real quick here, if that's all right. And oops. Now I've got the wrong thing up. Okay, there. Can you guys see my screen? Nope. I always do that. I think I just collapsed the thing down. Let's see. There we go. It says stop sharing. So I'll just stop sharing. I'll try it again. So let's share right here, screen 1, and then I'm going to put my evaluation over here. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. So this is just an example, and this is a little bit old, but this is I was just evaluating, a bookkeeper. And what we did was we went and these are exactly from their job description. This particular, now my job descriptions are different based on if the person's my payroll manager or if they're a bookkeeper, whatever they're doing. And so these are like the big general categories: job knowledge and expertise, general office knowledge, proficient with QuickBooks, job knowledge about accounting, their payroll knowledge, integrity and trust, Some of these are ones that go across the board: integrity, ability to solve problems. I'm sorry, I'm going a little fast. Strategic ability, and of course that would fall in with your mission. Attitude, able to work independently. So these are like big group ones. And then here's just some information to help the employee see what am I talking about here, you know. And this is a self-evaluation. I ask them to fill this out ahead of time, and I just ask them to write comments in here that says, you know, hey, how do you think you're doing? And they can rate or not rate themselves, but generally I just ask them to write the comments in here, and then we try to come up with, you know, this. I get to see their comments and see where they're thinking, and maybe they have some things that they did that I didn't remember during the interview. So it was kind of nice. And so that's it just goes on. And all of these again are things that they do that are on their job description. And then at the bottom, I have some of their KPIs, maintain their own clients, assisted. These are just my expectations for them, or their key performance indicators. And then this is what I expect the outcomes to be. And I just let them know, and they get this ahead of time, and it's going to be the same every year unless their job description changes. So that's just one way. And then down here is I have their goals. I ask them to list personal goals, and somebody's filled that out, so I'll get that off. But just what are your goals, so that, you know, if I can help as an employer, I will. But if not, at least I know those goals, and that helps a little bit. So so that's just one way. And I'm an Excel guru, so of course this is in an Excel spreadsheet, and then all of these numbers will populate at the bottom, and, you know, give me a little at the bottom. It'll give me a little numbers here, and it gives me, you know, like, it'll come out and tell me what it is based on what we do. So that's just me, because I'm just a little Excel nerd. But I wanted to share that to say your performance review can look like anything you want it, you know, to look like. It can just be a Word document, but it should tie back to their job description. And actually, whenever I do the performance reviews, I go back to the job description. I go, oh, we need to update this. So those things to me go hand in hand. I update the job description at the same time or near when I'm doing the performance review. And of course, I do it with the employee and say, no, I know you're doing a lot of this. I didn't realize it. Let's add that to your job description, you know, for the next time. So does that help anybody?
It helps me see my future performance reviews.
I know. So doing a self-evaluation before is also nice too. It's no problem in saying, hey, can you fill out? And maybe you don't give them the whole thing. Maybe you just give them the top 3 or 4 things that you want them to see. And it allows them to take time to really think introspectively and, you know, put something down on paper without feeling like they come in and they have to just say something off the cuff, you know. So that's what I like to do. So any other questions or anything? All right. Well, you know who to call.
Thanks, ladies. Really appreciate everybody taking the time to be with us. For those of you who are in the group today, just wanted to let you know that moving forward, as of January, we've spent the last couple months kind of developing our shared services schedule. So starting in January, our shared services will have a designated Thursday right now. So, and I believe HR Biz Solutions has the second Thursday of every month. So that's going to get started in the new year, and we'll be sending out an email with more details about that, just so that you can go ahead and get that down on your schedule, and, you know, get in the groove of meeting with us on Thursday mornings at 10:30. So thank you to everyone who was able to join us. Again, if you missed any points or want to revisit anything from today's presentation, you can catch this online on our YouTube page. So, and ladies, if we don't see you before the end of the year, happy holidays and happy new year.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Bye. Thanks, everyone.